Welcome back into the PCFF podcast, everyone. I am Clip Brock, and from one Brock to another, we're going to find out how the folks in Chicago are feeling about their draft. The Cartel/Shitballs going tight end with the first pick as they get Dallas Clark in the first round. We'll talk a little bit about that and more with Brock Letchworth, who joins us on the PCFF live line. He's the owner of the Chicago Cartel, or the Chicago Shitballs. Brock, first of all, are you going by the Cartel or Shitballs this season? What's the team name?
Well, we'll see how the first couple weeks go. That's typically been what's determined whether I change the name or not. Actually, it's always been always worked quite well. If we start off bad and I change the name to the Shitballs, the team kind of turns around a little bit. But we'll see.
You still do go with that logo of the great Python turd wrapped around the toilet on the Yahoo page, so you still got that probably the most classic logo in the league. I'll give you that. Brock,
yes. Brian Perry didn't. He made the mistake of not trademarking that.
Brock, let's talk about the pick we're going to highlight for the Cartel, and I want to use your third round selection because, like myself, you didn't have a second round pick, so you had to really make it count when it got back to you in the third round, and you were really excited to add Darren Sproles to your lineup, a guy that can do a lot of things. Talk about that pick a little bit and why you selected Sproles.
Well, the way I saw that was, first of all, having the New Orleans quarterback. I like the idea of having combos like I do with Breeze and Colston, and a team that puts up a lot of offensive numbers. You know, it's certainly not a bad thing to have a couple combinations with them. And Sproles catches a lot of passes. Essentially, I look at what Reggie Bush did there, and I have more confidence in Darren Sproles than I do Reggie Bush, based on the history of, for whatever reason. You know, some may disagree, but I do, and I think he'll be just as good or better than what Reggie Bush was if they use him the same way, which I expect him to. And so I just think it's a good chance to get some receptions and maybe some touchdowns where if I've got Breeze throwing the Sproles, you know, I get double the touchdowns on that, really. So that's kind of the way I saw it. I was pretty excited to get him because, I mean, I could have seen myself, if I had a second-round pick, taking him in the second round as well.
And in the first round, you go tight end, you go Dallas Clark. Go ahead and get a guy that, once again, is going to catch a lot of balls. So you had a lot of receptions, and you didn't get a wide receiver in those two picks. So pretty good thinking there in a point-per-reception league. Yeah,
I've been saying for a little while now that in our league, counting points per reception, it's just huge. The wide receiver position is huge, and there wasn't much for me to do in terms of picking up more wide receivers, so I thought the best approach was I go with the tight end, who some might argue was the best receiver available in the draft.
Yeah.
You know, even playing tight end, and try to get a running back with that third round pick with Sproles that could make some receptions as well. You know, if you've got a solid running back that plays just about every down, especially if they can catch the ball, that's big. But I still think having any type of player that gets reception, be it running back, wide receiver, tight end, whatever, is huge in our league. Those things add up. You know, when you can have somebody catch a ball and for no gain and you still get a point out of it, it's a pretty big thing.
Yeah, you said it. Mr. Letchworth, we'll get you on for an entire podcast one of these days down the line. Any obnoxious sports facts and figures for us today, or you want to save that for later in the year?
I'm going to say that. I would like to say one statistic you might be interested in. On draft day, I think I took 4 shits on draft day.
4 shits, and that's got to be a record, I would think.
Yeah, well, you know, we'll see. If it works out well this year, maybe I'll try to make that a tradition, you know, being superstitious kind of guy that I am. Can I have one more thing, though, Clip?
Absolutely.
I'm going to tell you right now, we're talking about draft picks.
Yeah.
And I said this on draft day, and I'm standing by it. I have a lot of confidence in this pick for some reason. It's just a gut. It's just intuition. Jericho Cotchery.
Yeah.
I see that being a steal in this draft. Him going to the Steelers, I foresee him having pretty good numbers this year. And to get him where I got him, and I don't recall exactly what round it was, but it was late, I think that's going to be a steal.
It was very late. He fell off the radar. In fact, I was going to take him the pick after you had, and I knew who you were talking about, an NC State guy and a guy that just makes plays. And it looked like his Jets teammates were sad to see him go, and he's going to be a great fit in Pittsburgh and had a good game last night in the preseason game. So
he's a true shitball.
He is a shitball through and through, as are you, Mr. Letchworth, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brock. I wanted to hear from New York representatives, Vegas, and Cleveland as well on this show. Couldn't do it today due to time constraints, but you'll hear from those guys later on in the season on the PCFF podcast. But right now, time to go to the mailbag here on the PCFF podcast. I asked if you have any questions you want answered to post them on the PCFF message board. It's a new feature. We will have it each and every week here on the PCFF podcast. Now, the special surprise for you is who exactly will be answering these questions, and I'm not sure who the questions were directed to if you thought I might answer them, but I will not be answering the questions. In fact, it'll be our very own PCFF robot who will be answering the questions. So for the first time, I would like to introduce the PCFF robot to the show. PCFF robot, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
PCFF robot, do you have a name?
No, I do not have a name. In fact, I would like to request that the owners of the PCFF League vote on a name for me.
Interesting concept. I like it, and we will get that done. I'll go ahead and post the question on the message board. What should we name the PCFF podcast robot? And Mr. Robot, as you know, the Fox robot had a similar poll where people named him. I believe his name is Cletus, and he's really...
Do not compare me with that gay robot.
Okay, PCFF robot, I apologize. I will not compare you to that robot, gay, as you call him. But let's go ahead and get to these questions. People want these questions answered, and first we will go out to, let's see who posted the first question. That would be Ted in Aden. Ted in Aden wanted to know, first of all, he says, love the pod. First one we've had out here in Aden, so glad we could bring the first podcast to Aden, North Carolina. My question is, what individual do you think will have the most points in the league this season? So, PCFF robot, who is that player that will have the most points this season?
First things first, Ted, thank you for the question. Aden is beautiful this time of year. My answer may surprise you and some of my robot friends. Tom Brady will have the most points this season. Last year, Arian Foster finished with 392 fantasy points. Tom Brady had 345 fantasy points. This year, Tom Brady will have around 380 fantasy points. That will lead the PCFF.
So there you go. PCFF robot thinks Tom Brady will lead the league in points this season. Next question, we go to the Grime, to the Grimy Grime. Grimesland, North Carolina. Will has a question for you, PCFF robot. Who are your two teams that will end up with the first-round buys in 2011?
First things first, Will, thank you for the question. Grimesland is beautiful this time of year. The two teams I see having the best record at the end of the regular season will be the Miami Militia, the defending champions of the PCFF, and Matt Hager's Tennessee 39ers. You look up and down these lineups and all you see is greatness. Barring injury, I think these two teams will have a great year.
So there you go, Miami and Tennessee, the two teams the PCFF robot thinks will have the first-round buys coming up in the playoffs this season. And now we move along to Pactolus, North Carolina, where Blake had a question for you, PCFF robot. Blake wants to know, will a running back score 16 touchdowns in 2011, and if so, who?
First things first, Blake, thank you for the question. Pactolus is beautiful this time of year. Last year, Arian Foster accomplished this feat you are asking about. This year, a running back will score 16 touchdowns. His name is Adrian Peterson. He plays for the Tennessee 39ers. Peterson found the end zone on the ground 12 times a year ago. And believe it or not, some people said that was a down year for Adrian Peterson. If that's a down year, what's a good year going to look like? 16 or more touchdowns for Adrian Peterson.
Okay, good answer, PCFF Robot. We got one more question. We go out to Andy. Andy did not say where he's from. I guess parts unknown. Andy wants to know, is it true that you lose it if you don't use it? PCFF Robot, your thoughts?
First things first, Andy, thank you for your question. Parts unknown are beautiful this time of year. I'm assuming you are talking about the human penis, which I do not have because I am a robot. Therefore, I cannot answer the question you have asked.
Andy, I'm sorry the PCFF Robot could not answer your question, but if you have another one you'd like to ask, and this goes out to anyone, post them on the PCFF message board. The PCFF Robot will be here to answer your questions each week. And we'll also have a poll, name the PCFF Robot, going on the website very soon. PCFF Robot, thank you for joining us and answering questions.
Thank you for having me. The PCFF studios are beautiful this time of year.
All right, there he is, the PCFF Robot, joining us today on the PCFF podcast, and that will wrap things up. Folks, thank you for tuning in to the second edition of the PCFF podcast. We'll be back next week with more PCFF talk right here on the PCFF podcast.